Welcome back to the deep dive. If you look at the global economy today, it's this strange mix, isn't it? On one hand, you have incredible, almost sci-fi technological progress. And on the other, this deep, pervasive economic anxiety. Automation isn't some far-off threat anymore. I mean, it's here. It's rewriting the employment landscape right now.
And we're seeing how brittle our massive global supply chains can be.
Exactly. So the fundamental question, the one that's facing every planner, every leader, and really every one of us is this: how do we achieve true, lasting economic stability? How do we maximize human potential and, this is the big one, guarantee a dignified livelihood for every single person, regardless of what AI or robotics can do?
It really is the challenge of our era. I mean, we're trying to fit these complex, hyper-efficient realities of the 21st century into economic frameworks that were designed, back in the Industrial Revolution.
They're not fit for purpose?
Not anymore. We're past the point of just minor tweaks. We really need a complete systemic overhaul. So our mission today is, it's explicitly optimistic. We're diving deep into an alternative structural blueprint that promises nothing less than 100% employment and real socioeconomic justice.
And that blueprint comes from the progressive utilization theory, or PROUT. Specifically, its incredibly detailed industrial policy. What makes this so compelling and why we wanted to do this deep dive is that we aren't just dealing with broad philosophical ideas.
Not at all.
Our sources, they provide what is basically an architectural diagram. It's a precise, actionable plan that dictates everything from ownership structures and core operating principles all the way down to the exact demographic ratios needed for global balance.
And that's why we're calling this a deep dive. The material is rigorous. It details a 3-tiered industrial classification. It specifies worker welfare policies that cover everything from housing to maternity care. And, maybe the most futuristic part, it outlines the actual mechanism for embracing maximum automation without causing a single job loss.
Okay, let's unpack this thing. Our key question is fundamental. What radical structural adjustments to industry and ownership does PROUT propose to ensure that every individual has guaranteed access to their basic necessities, and beyond that, a path to mental and spiritual fulfillment?
Right.
We need to really get our heads around the intricate mechanism behind this claim of achieving and maintaining full employment, especially as we're plunging headfirst into the age of hyper-efficient technology. Let's jump in.
So to start, PROUT demands a radical reimagining of industry itself. It doesn't just lump everything together. It doesn't treat a local tailor shop the same way it treats a massive steel mill.
No, absolutely not.
It divides the entire industrial landscape into 3 distinct tiers, and it's all based on their size, their complexity, and most importantly, how essential they are to the population.
Yeah.
And we have to start with the most critical, the key industries.
These are the societal bedrock. The sources define them as industries with these complex, comprehensive structures that produce raw material.
The absolute base, the basics, the inputs that are necessary for all other production. So think coal, iron, foundational chemicals, petroleum refining, and also essential services like large-scale power generation. These are the engines of the economy. Society just cannot function without them.
And the management principle for these key industries is really clear. It's centralized and it's governmental. They have to be managed directly by the immediate or local government. And this decision, this idea of removing them from private hands entirely, it leads us to the most defining principle of this whole policy,
which is the mandate of no profit and no loss.
Let's talk about that, because that's huge.
It's the economic centerpiece of the entire PROUT structure. It's foundational. Key industries must function purely on a utility basis. They are not entities designed to maximize financial returns for shareholders. They're designed to minimize the cost of living for the populace.
Okay, but that immediately brings up a question. I mean, any economist listening right now would ask this. If you remove the profit motive, which is the traditional incentive for efficiency, for innovation, how do you guarantee these foundational government-run industries don't just become stagnant, bureaucratic, inefficient monopolies? Where does the pressure to be better come from?
That's a crucial point, and the answer is you have to shift the entire metric of success. In a capitalist system, success is financial profit. It's the bottom line.
Right.
In the PROUT system, success is defined as utility maximization and cost minimization for the people in that region. The pressure for efficiency doesn't come from a profit incentive. It comes from the demands of the industries in Tier 2, the large-scale cooperative sector, who rely on these key industries for affordable inputs.
So the customers are the accountability mechanism.
The customers and governmental oversight that's focused on quality control and environmental stewardship, not on generating tax revenue. The government isn't trying to squeeze money out of them. It's trying to ensure they deliver the best possible service at the lowest possible cost.
So let's dive into the why of that no profit, no losses rule, because the effect on the wider economy seems profound. Let's take power generation, the example from the source. Say right now it operates with a 15% mandated profit margin that gets passed on to shareholders. What happens when that 15% is structurally just gone?
That benefit cascades down the entire economic chain. It's a ripple effect. If power and foundational materials like steel or chemicals are 15% cheaper at the input level because that profit margin is gone, then the cost of production for every single item that follows.
Everything.
Everything. From a light engineering good that's produced by a cooperative to the tools used in agriculture, that cost is immediately and permanently reduced.
This isn't just a theory then, it's about building affordability into the system itself.
Exactly. You're directly and significantly increasing the real purchasing capacity of the general population. And you're doing it without resorting to artificial inflation or these complex government subsidies that have to be funded by taxes later on.
It's a structural way of boosting real wages and the standard of living from the bottom up.
Yes. PROUT basically views access to energy, raw materials, and water as basic human necessities. And if those necessities are structurally affordable, the entire economic floor for everyone lifts up.
The sources also touch on the future direction for these key industries. It notes that, okay, right now they're centralized because, you can't have an iron and steel plant in every single neighborhood.
Of course.
But PROUT advocates for implementing decentralization of these industries in the future as circumstances change and technology allows.
And this is such an important futuristic nuance. PROUT is anticipating technological shifts. It recognizes that today's centralized megafactory, which relies on this massive, often environmentally damaging infrastructure, could become tomorrow's distributed network of smaller, more localized, sustainable production units.
Like what?
Well, thanks to advancements like localized 3D printing for complex parts or small modular reactors for power, the goal is always the same. Remove control from private, profit-seeking entities and distribute production closer to the people who actually use the products.
And there's a huge social and moral argument driving that push for decentralization. The sources are pretty vivid about the negative effects of these massive centralized industrial centers.
They're quite stark, yeah. Centralization, it argues, creates a whole host of human and social problems. People in these areas struggle to stay healthy because fresh produce and milk are scarce, since the local agricultural land has been paved over by urban sprawl.
Right, you live in a food desert.
And more worryingly, it creates social dysfunction. The sources point out that immorality, corruption, and crime become rampant because these massive anonymous urban centers allow thieves, criminals, and other antisocial elements to conceal themselves easily. You get air pollution, water pollution, malnutrition. PROUT's argument is that these huge urban megacenters are fundamentally incompatible with neo-humanist principles because they just degrade the physical, mental, and social health of the people who live there.
Okay, so that's tier one, the foundation. Moving to the second tier, we get to the large-scale industries. These are the medium-sized operations, not so complex that they need state management, but too large for just one person to own and run.
Right. So if tier one is the essential infrastructure, tier two is really the powerhouse of production. And these industries are managed by cooperative institutions, specifically producer cooperatives, which are owned by the workers, and consumer cooperatives owned by the buyers.
And what are they producing here?
This is where the bulk of medium-scale consumer goods get made. So things like light engineering goods, clothing, processed foods, things that require a moderate scale of operation to be efficient. And they operate on what the policy calls a nominal profit principle, but, and this is key, they absolutely cannot be guided by monopoly production.
So there has to be competition.
There has to be diversity. This sector is designed to be the main economic engine, providing the widest possible base of diversified, localized production.
And what is it about the cooperative structure that makes it so ideal for managing this crucial middle tier?
Well, the policy is very clear on this. It says cooperatives are the best way for people to independently organize themselves, to collectively control their own economic welfare and guarantee their livelihood. It completely bypasses the absentee landlord or the distant, faceless shareholder.
It puts control right back in the hands of the people who are either doing the work or using the product.
Exactly. It's the highest form of economic democracy. It ensures that accountability remains local and visible. You can't hide from your fellow worker owners or your customer owners.
Okay, and then finally we get to the smallest tier, small-scale industries, or what they also call privately owned enterprises. This is the realm of the high street, the neighborhood businesses.
Yes, these are the highly personalized services, the tailor shops, the small sweet shops, the local cafes and bakeries. In this tier, individual ownership is not only allowed, but it's actually encouraged, and they're granted permission for a slight profit. This recognizes the value of individual initiative and, that personal touch and service.
But the sources are very clear on the limitation, which acts as a kind of structural guardrail.
Oh, absolutely. To prevent exploitation or the accumulation of too much wealth in one person's hands or the formation of new monopolies, these enterprises are strictly limited in their size and scope.
So what happens if a small business, let's say a really specialized bakery, becomes exceptionally successful and it grows past a certain threshold of capital or employees?
It has to legally transition into the cooperative sector.
It has to evolve.
Exactly. This prevents the birth of future capitalist behemoths from individual entrepreneurship. It encourages enterprise up to the point where it serves the locality.
Right.
But then it demands that the enterprise transition into a collective structure when its scale starts to affect the wider region.
So it's a policy that wants a vibrant local economy, but it aggressively prevents wealth consolidation and exploitation.
Precisely. And we shouldn't overlook the cottage industries. They kind of fall under this umbrella of small-scale production. They're mainly focused on non-essential goods, sometimes luxury items, but they are absolutely critical, especially in rural areas, because they provide livelihoods, particularly for women, and they help diversify the rural income base beyond just pure agriculture.
So how do they survive?
For this to work, the medium-scale cooperatives and the local administration have to actively take responsibility for supplying them with raw materials and power. It ensures these small home-based industries aren't crippled by shortages. It's a fully integrated support network.
So we've established the what, the key, the large-scale, the small-scale industries. Now we have to transition to the who. Who actually manages and owns the means of production within this framework? This three-part division of industry leads directly to what has to be a hybrid economic structure made up of three distinct sectors of ownership and management.
And this is where PROUT really distinguishes itself from traditional planned economies. It's not trying to abolish private initiative or local ownership. It's trying to channel it into a framework that's governed by social welfare.
Let's start with Sector A, the public sector. This is the domain of the state or the immediate regional government.
And this sector is defined by its strategic importance. It includes all those key industries we just talked about: raw materials, energy production, heavy capital goods, defense, public transport. These are the operations that must run on that no profit, no loss principle to provide the maximum utility to the population.
So this sector provides the bedrock, the security and infrastructure that the whole balanced economy rests on.
Right. It's the government's proper role.
Yeah.
Manage security and basic infrastructure for the people.
But the sources really stress that the real energy, the real dynamism of this economy is in Sector B, the cooperative sector. They call it the main engine.
It's the heart of the system, both structurally and ideologically. This sector includes large-scale consumption goods, light engineering, and, critically, large-scale agriculture. The policy sees cooperatives as the most ethical and the most efficient form of economic organization. They're designed to maximize the economic welfare of their members, the local population, not a distant owning class.
It makes sense. When people organize independently to control their own economic destiny, you have the highest guarantee of livelihood and accountability.
Exactly.
But okay, this sounds ideal, but cooperatives still need capital. They still need to function efficiently, and they're allowed a nominal profits. So how is that profit managed? If the goal is social justice, how do you stop the people who put in the capital from just taking the lion's share of the profit?
That is a critical question. And the source provides a surprisingly specific solution: the profit distribution formula. The total profit of the cooperative is distributed among all the workers and members, but it's based on two distinct factors.
What are they?
Factor one is their individual capital investment in the cooperative, so you get a return on your investment. But factor two, and this is equally important, is the service they render to the production and management. Your labor, your effort.
Okay, let's break that down. Give me an analogy. Say a large cooperative factory makes, I don't know, $100,000 in nominal profit over a year. How would that formula typically divide up the rewards?
Well, the policy ensures it's not just a simple capital return model. A small fixed portion, maybe 10 or 20%, might go back to those who provided the initial capital as a fair return on their risk.
Okay.
But the vast majority, the remaining 80 or 90%, is distributed based on effort, attendance, quality of work, management responsibility, human contribution.
So this means that a diligent, highly productive janitor who provides an essential service to the factory could receive a much larger share of the profit than, say, a slightly richer individual who made a small capital investment but does no active work in the co-op.
A much larger share. It weights human labor and service as the primary source of value and rewards it accordingly. It incentivizes both prudent investment and dedicated high-quality effort from everyone involved.
So it keeps the cooperative focused on its human element.
Exactly.
All right, and finally, there's Sector C, the small-scale sector. We already defined what they produce.
And this is the domain of individual economic activity and micro-businesses, proprietorships, partnerships, small family farms, and very, very small cooperatives. It ensures there's always room for personal initiative and localized service. But, crucially, while the sources allow this sector to exist, they are deliberately ring-fenced to stop them from growing large enough to threaten the stability of the cooperative sector or create localized exploitation.
Right, the guardrail we talked about. So this whole structured economic landscape, public, cooperative, and small scale, it's designed to avoid the pitfalls of either pure state communism or, unfettered capitalism. And this brings us to a key ideological distinction in PROUT, what the source calls the anti-capitalist stance.
And this distinction is vital for understanding PROUT's progressive approach. PROUT advocates for the socialization of industries, not nationalization.
And that difference is so often lost in conventional political discussions. I mean, if the state takes over an industry, most people call that socialization. But PROUT says, no, that's nationalization and it's flawed. Why?
Because nationalization just means replacing private ownership with bureaucratic state control. And that control is often centralized and very distant from the actual operation. This creates its own set of problems. Inefficiency, a total lack of local accountability, slow decision-making, and very often corruption because the controlling entities, the bureaucracy, are immune to the immediate needs of the workers or the consumers in that region.
So the critique of nationalization is that you're just swapping the capitalist boss for an unresponsive, inefficient government manager.
Precisely. Socialization, in the PROUT context, means control by the local populace, the workers and consumers, usually through the structure of the cooperatives. This ensures two things. First, that the wealth generated stays within the economic region where it was created, so it circulates locally and boosts regional purchasing power.
And second,
it ensures transparency and immediate accountability. If a cooperative is being inefficient, the people who suffer are the members who own and operate it. So that forces corrective action quickly and democratically.
And the policy is adamant that key industries must never, ever be controlled by capitalists.
That's a non-negotiable prerequisite for economic stability and justice. If key industries, the raw material providers, the essential service generators, if they're left in the hands of capitalists, their operation will be guided by the drive for profit maximization, not social utility. And that leads to essential services being overpriced. It creates systemic economic inequality, and it makes the whole society vulnerable.
The cost of living becomes dictated by private financial goals instead of public necessity.
Right, and that makes the whole no profit, no losses principle completely impossible to implement. PROUT argues that structural control over the essentials is required to guarantee basic human rights.
Okay, so we're moving now into the statistical core of the PROUT blueprint. Because it's not enough to just define who manages industry. You have to define how labor is distributed to prevent this massive global economic imbalance that we see today. The goal here is ambitious, and it's deeply progressive, to fundamentally move people off this excessive dependence on land and create diversified, guaranteed employment pathways that are resilient and localized.
This is where we run into the foundational principle of PROUT. PRAMA. PRAMA is a term that's often misunderstood, but it essentially means the principle of balance and dynamic adjustment. It's the core planning element that prevents the kind of structural imbalances we see all over the globe today, where you have some nations that are purely agrarian and poor, and others that are overwhelmingly industrial and exploitative.
So PRAMA is what dictates these labor ratios, and it all starts with agriculture.
Yes. PROUT elevates agriculture to the status of a full-fledged industry, giving it the necessary investment and respect it deserves. But And this is so crucial. Dependence on agriculture must be limited to only 30 to 40% of the population.
Wow. That is a staggering adjustment for much of the developing world. I mean, in many countries, you have upwards of 70, 80, even 90% of the population relying almost solely on agriculture. The sources call that a surplus labor area.
And that over-reliance is the very definition of disguised unemployment and poverty. If 90% of the population is trying to squeeze a low level of productivity from the same finite amount of land, per capita income is naturally going to be depressed. The PROUT strategy is to alleviate this pressure by absorbing all that surplus labor into two highly specialized industrial categories.
Okay, let's look at the first one. Agro-industries. These are agriculture dependent.
Right. Think of them as the value-added processing sector. These industries rely directly on what the farms produce. So examples would be flour mills, sugar mills, oil mills, textile mills that process cotton or jute, paper mills, and factories that are dedicated to herbal medicine. They take the raw output of the farm and they transform it into something more valuable.
And the labor target for this sector?
A stable 20% of the population. This is designed to keep that value-added processing local, which prevents the all-too-common scenario of raw materials being shipped away cheaply, only to be re-imported later as expensive finished goods.
Okay, and the second category is the mirror image of that. Agrico-industries, which are agriculture supportive.
These are the industries that manufacture the tools and the inputs that are necessary for maximum agricultural productivity and modernization. So we're talking about fertilizer production, manufacturing of hoes, plows, small, appropriate scale tractors, and irrigation equipment. The labor target here is also 20% of the population.
So this ensures that the farming sector, that 30 to 40%, is technologically robust and always modernizing because it's supported by local manufacturing.
Exactly.
So if we add that up, we now have 70 to 80% of the entire working population engaged in a fully integrated regional economic system that's focused on food security and self-sufficiency. Agriculture plus agro-industry plus agrico-industry, that's a really powerful regional base. The remainder is then allocated to non-agricultural industries.
Right. These are the industries that are not directly related to the land. They focus on complex manufacturing and services, steel plants, oil refineries, salt production, non-herbal pharmaceuticals, things like that.
And this group has the most critical, the tightest window in the entire PROUT framework. The sources stress that the percentage of people engaged here has to be kept within 20 to 30% of the total population for a really balanced socioeconomic structure.
That 10 percentage point window is, according to PROUT, the line between global stability and global instability. This specific ratio is PROUT's answer to preventing systemic conflict and exploitation between nations.
Let's analyze what happens when that balance is lost, because this speaks so directly to the structure of our current global economy. Scenario 1. An area is industrially undeveloped, so it's below that 20% threshold.
Okay, so if a nation or region has less than 20% of its workforce in complex non-agricultural industry, it means it can't produce enough complex finished goods for its own consumption. They suffer from chronically low per capita income, a low standard of living, and severely limited purchasing capacity. Their import index is almost always higher than their export index in terms of value.
So they're always in a trade deficit.
Always. As the source bluntly states, such an area is forced to remain a satellite of a developed country. They become perpetually dependent, exporting their cheap raw materials only to import expensive finished goods made from those same materials.
And PROUT argues that this dependency, it jeopardizes the balance of power and it actually increases the possibility of war.
It does, because economic weakness invites external control. A country that can't support its own complex manufacturing base is perpetually vulnerable to economic coercion and geopolitical manipulation, which makes regional stability incredibly fragile.
Okay, now let's look at scenario 2, which is really a critique of the developed world. Over-industrialization, going above that 30% limit.
When a nation pushes beyond 30%, and many developed nations historically and today are far, far above this threshold, they face a catastrophic internal contradiction. They have massive production capacity, but they don't have a matching internal market or consumption base to absorb all of it.
They can produce endless goods, but their own population, even if it's relatively wealthy, just can't consume it all.
Correct. So these over-industrialized countries immediately face the threat of economic depression and growing unemployment if they cannot secure external markets. The structural imbalance at home forces them to look outward, to expand.
This is the engine of colonialism.
Historically, yes. And modern neocolonialism. Over-industrialized countries are structurally compelled to go out and grab productive agricultural regions or to control underdeveloped nations, using them as captive markets for their finished goods and as cheap sources of raw materials.
So the argument here is that all the modern trade tensions we see, the reliance of wealthy nations on exploiting external markets, that's not just a series of bad policy choices. It's the direct, inevitable symptom of poorly managed, unbalanced industrial ratios at home. Trade wars are a structural failure.
It's a powerful reframing of the problem. PROUT argues that if a country achieves that balanced ratio, if it keeps its non-agricultural dependency between 20 and 30%, it becomes self-sufficient, it becomes internally prosperous, and it loses the structural economic need to be aggressive or exploitative abroad. A balanced ratio is the prerequisite for both peace and prosperity.
The sources really drive this point home with some real-world examples of missed potential. They cite regions like Rar and the adjacent state of Orissa in India, which are incredibly rich in agricultural, mineral, and forest resources.
They have every natural ingredient necessary for a thriving, balanced economy. I mean, they're ideal for establishing numerous agro-industries, agrico-industries, steel plants, light engineering. Yet, because of the complete absence of social and economic planning based on PRAMA, this principle of balanced ratios, a huge percentage of the people there remain trapped in poverty.
The problem isn't a lack of resources.
Not at all. It's the total absence of the correct, balanced economic structure to utilize those resources for the benefit of the local population. It's a tragic analogy for so many resource-rich but structurally poor regions all across the developing world.
Okay, now we have to confront the great paradox of the 21st century. How do you marry maximum technological advancement with the guarantee of human dignity and full employment? I mean, PROUT explicitly supports maximum modernization in both industry and agriculture. It says we should introduce the most appropriate scientific technology to embrace efficiency. Yet, it also guarantees 100% employment. In our current system, those two forces seem completely mutually exclusive.
This is, for me, the most progressive and futuristic element of PROUT's industrial policy. And it really is the key aha moment for anyone listening, especially as we think about the rapid advancements in things like generative AI and robotics.
Right.
PROUT isolates the fundamental flaw of capitalism. When rationalization or automation happens, the surplus value, that efficiency gain, is claimed by the owners as profit. And the surplus labor, the human worker, is simply discarded. They become unemployed. And that leads to massive social instability and a reduction in the overall purchasing power of the community.
So technology, under capitalism, becomes a tool for creating inequality.
Precisely. In PROUT's collective economic system, that dynamic is structurally prevented. Because the goal is not maximum profit, it's maximum human welfare. Full employment will be maintained by progressively reducing working hours as scientific technology increases production.
So the efficiency dividend, the extra value that's created by the machine or the computer or the AI, it's not distributed just as financial profit to a few owners. It's distributed as free time and increased leisure to everyone. Technology literally buys humanity back its time.
It fundamentally redefines the entire purpose of technology. If a massive technological leap, say in an agrico-industry cooperative, increases the output per worker by 50%, the policy mandates a progressive reduction in the work week by a corresponding amount. That worker maintains their full income and purchasing power, but now has more hours for family, community, personal pursuits.
The fear of automation just vanishes. Automation becomes a humanitarian goal, not a threat. This sounds transformative, but the implementation must be complex. How is this progressive reduction managed? Is this something that happens every year? How do the cooperatives manage scheduling when these efficiency leaps might be sudden and unexpected?
The sources indicate this has to be governed by regional planning bodies that work in adjustment with the cooperative's own bylaws. The pace is dynamic. It's dictated by the technological maturity and the efficiency gains in a specific economic region. It's a continuous, monitored process.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If a regional cooperative invests in a new AI-driven logistics system that reduces the necessary manual planning hours by, say, 10%, that 10% saving is immediately socialized by reducing the work week across all the relevant departments. The principle is that no human being should be required to perform unnecessary labor when a machine can do it better or faster. But the gain from that efficiency must be shared by all.
That is inherently more humane. But what security is provided to the workers in that reduced hour structure? The sources mandate this comprehensive worker welfare to ensure a guaranteed minimum of necessities.
The policy is designed to make that guarantee structural. It eliminates the need for complex, often conditional, governmental welfare programs or handouts. This is the key to ensuring that industrial work, even if it's reduced in hours, still provides a happy life with justice and dignity.
Let's talk about the wage structure, because the sources suggest something interesting, that wages don't have to be accepted only as money.
That's right. Wages can be paid partly in monetary form and partly in the form of essential goods or services. And PROUT advises a gradual increase in this non-monetary component and adjustment with the monetary part.
That's a powerful hedge against inflation, isn't it? If a portion of your wage automatically covers guaranteed, high-quality housing or food staples or energy, all provided through those no-profit, no-loss key industries and the cooperative sector, your exposure to volatile price increases for essentials is minimized.
It stabilizes the real income of the worker. It maximizes their purchasing power for discretionary goods and non-essential items. But beyond that, the system still has to recognize and reward human effort. PROUT leverages both ideological inspiration, that idealistic motivation to do good work, and material incentives, like bonuses and gratuity for quality and quantity of output. Humans need purpose, but they also need tangible reward for their efforts.
The detail on the mandated welfare provisions is really remarkable. It elevates the whole definition of employment from just having a paycheck to having guaranteed life security that's intrinsic to the job itself.
The policy makes this security an absolute requirement for any industrial operation. The critical welfare provisions that are mandated are, first, maternal welfare and comprehensive maternity facilities.
So not just leave, but actual facilities.
Exactly. It's a direct recognition that any sustainable labor policy has to support the creation and the well-being of the next generation. Second, free medical facilities for the worker and their dependents. Third, work insurance facilities to cover any unforeseen circumstances.
And housing.
Yes. Home housing facilities. Guaranteed access to dignified, affordable, decentralized housing, ensuring the worker isn't tethered to those centralized, polluted industrial centers we talked about, and even vacation travel home facilities to make sure workers have the means to periodically return to their place of origin or just take restorative breaks. And then, other miscellaneous welfare facilities necessary for a complete, happy life.
With a comprehensive security net like that, workers are free from the primary anxieties that plague most modern labor forces, healthcare and housing.
And that security feeds directly back into the goal of human development. Because if workers have reduced hours, they have security, and all their material needs are met, their focus naturally shifts. The policy dictates that workers will be appointed based on the progressive utilization of their physical, mental, and spiritual capacities. This moves so far beyond just fitting a person into a narrow, repetitive job description.
So the excess free time, the time generated by reduced working hours, is channeled into something meaningful.
That time is considered a fundamental dividend of progress. Workers will be actively encouraged and given the facilities to use that free time to develop their artistic qualities, pursue intellectual endeavors, and most importantly, to advance spiritually. This is the neo-humanist connection. The purpose of economic liberation isn't just more consumption, it's freeing the mind from material struggle so that humanity can pursue higher, more meaningful goals. It transforms labor from a necessary evil into a platform for growth and fulfillment.
So we've now laid out the architectural blueprint, the ownership mechanism, the statistical constraints, and this futuristic solution to automation. Before we summarize the core ratios one last time, let's quickly recap the final policy cornerstones that have to be maintained for this entire structure to function, ethically and efficiently.
These are the guiding rules that prevent the system from becoming bureaucratic or falling into historical traps. First, PROUT supports the formation of labor organizations, but they must be formed by the workers themselves, democratically and independently.
So no political interference.
Right. They must not be manipulated or controlled by political parties or external corporate interests. This is about protecting the integrity of the labor movement.
Okay, second.
Second, the policy mandates the maximum utilization of all industrial capacities. This means no idle factories, no wasted potential. It's an economic environment that is constantly striving for productive efficiency, but for social good, not for private profit.
And third?
Third, the prudent distribution of industrial output. This means ensuring that goods and services actually reach the people who need them, efficiently and ethically, preventing artificial scarcity or hoarding. And fourth, The industry must always be organized according to that balanced development policy we detailed. Those critical ratios have to be perpetually monitored and maintained.
And that fourth point is the statistical guardrail against global instability. So if we put all of these required labor ratios together, we get the proudest blueprint for the ideal labor distribution, the structural requirement for that really balanced socioeconomic structure.
This is the math of justice, really. It's a structure designed to avoid over-reliance on any single sector, ensuring regional self-sufficiency and stability. So to recap, the breakdown is
Agriculture.
Agriculture is at 30 to 40%, and it's supported by technology and industry, which reduces the pressure on the land.
Then agro-industry.
Agro-industry, the value-added processing, is at 20%. And agrico-industry, the tools and inputs for farming, is also at 20%.
And then the critical one, non-agricultural industry.
That's kept in the tight window of 20 to 30% for global stability. Then you have general business, so trade, commerce, local services at 10%. And finally, intellectual work, so administration, education, clerks, officers, also at 10%.
When you lay it all out like that, you see how the system is designed to industrialize, specifically to alleviate pressure on the land and support regional production, rather than industrializing for the sole purpose of export-driven profit maximization.
Which, as we've discussed, inevitably leads to aggression abroad and depression at home.
The takeaway seems so clear. This detailed framework is intended to create a harmonious system where industry actually serves humanity. It guarantees physical security through structural affordability, that no profit, no loss principle, and it guarantees freedom for mental and spiritual growth through those progressively reduced working hours. It's an optimistic, progressive, and deeply detailed plan for the age of AI.
It's a vision that puts the pursuit of human dignity and intellectual freedom ahead of just raw GDP growth. It completely redefines success as collective well-being rather than private wealth accumulation.
So we've taken an exhaustive deep dive today into the specifics of the PROUT industrial structure. We talked about the revolutionary no profit, no loss mandate for essential services.
The centrality of the cooperative sector as the main economic engine for accountability.
And those rigorous mathematical constraints, the balanced labor ratios that are designed to prevent geopolitical instability.
But for me, the most forward-looking concept, the one that speaks directly to every single job fear that people have today, is that mechanism of reducing work hours in proportion to technological advancement. It just flips the script entirely on what technology means for the worker. It turns automation into a collective boon, not a job killer.
Absolutely. And I think the final provocative thought we have to leave you, the listener, with builds directly on this idea of reducing working hours as the progressive future for human dignity. If PROUT successfully uses technology to free up human time and maximize purchasing power, how much of our current conventional economic policy today relies on actively maintaining artificial labor demand, promoting scarcity, and ensuring people are just too busy struggling for subsistence to pursue the very mental or spiritual growth that PROUT elevates as the ultimate goal?
It's a profound question that really invites deep reflection on the purpose of labor itself.
It does. We encourage you to explore the source texts on the progressive utilization theory to better understand these neo-humanist views on economic governance and social justice, and to dive deeper, to understand PROUT, the progressive utilization theory, and to work toward a world of justice, happiness, and harmony built on a sustainable, moral, ethical mindset for everyone. We encourage you to subscribe to the Sublibras Movement YouTube channel and maybe even join a PROUT study circle.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a brighter, more balanced future.